So in order for us to use MockMvc with Spring Boot, and basically MockMvc allows us to test our RESTful API semantics, i.e. whether we are using the post method correctly or the path is correct, and we are sending the actual body to the request, and then we can check upon the status code, so on and so forth. So to use the MockMvc, we need to use this annotation, so at and then auto configure and then MockMvc, and that's all. Now we can go ahead and simply auto wire MockMvc, so private and then MockMvc, and there we go. Now simply say at and then auto and then wired. There we go. So what this now allows us to do is to do something like this. So I can go ahead and simply say MockMvc dot and then perform and then put, and this will come from mock and then mvc request and then builders and then dot and then put. There we go. And we can have this as a static import. So let's go ahead and do that. It looks neater. And what we're going to do is simply pass the actual path. So inside here, go back to the customer registration controller, and we want to actually test this path. So Control C, or actually Command C, go back, paste that in, right? So this actually throws an exception. So let me simply add exception to method signature, and there we go. So let me put this full screen, and now inside, right? So inside here, I'm going to say dot and then content type. So the content type of what we are going to send to our API will be, so right here, so application and then JSON, just like that. And let me put this on a new line, just like that, and then just like that, and this actually should be, oops, there, right? So now we actually specify the content type, and let's also say that, so right here, and we will format this in a second. So right here, content, so we want to send the content, right? So we want to send this customer right here. So we want to send this as object to JSON and then pass customer. So let's actually create this object to JSON method. So this will pretty much just return a strings and not a byte array. So string and then customer. There we go. So now let's go ahead and simply say try. So we want to try return new object and then mapper. So this is how you convert a object to string JSON, and then write value as string and then pass the actual object. So customer, there we go. This throws an exception, and I simply say catch, and this will be JSON process exception, or actually processing exception. And within, what we're going to say is simply say fail. So we want to fail this test, and you can add a message here, but for now, well, actually let's add a message. So fail to convert object to JSON, right? And this will be actually object and not customer, because this could be anything, right? So object, there we go, and then object. And after we fail, we want to return something, right? So let's simply return null, and there we go. Now let's scroll up, so right here, and end this with semicolon. And right here, this is actually complaining because it says that we should replace this with object requires non-null, right? So you could change that to this and the error goes away, and this simply makes sure that this object is not null. So now this will return, so right here, let me extract this to a variable. It will return the result actions. So I'm going to simply rename this to customer reg result and then action, or actually actions, right? And there we go. So what I'm going to do here is the following. So I'm going to simply say south and then customer registration result actions, because I want to debug this so you see what is happening. So let's now go ahead and debug this method right here. So simply right click, or actually not method, but the test method, and then debug, and then add a breakpoint here. There we go. So now we have the breakpoint there, and what I'm going to do is open up the project tab, and inside of the customer registration controller, let's also add a breakpoint here. So basically, we want to see whether we can hit this breakpoint just to make sure that we are calling the right thing. Now let's go ahead and simply resume. And the test fails. So let's see why the test has failed. So URL should start with path or be a complete URL. So let me actually go back, and I think I know what the issue is. So I think this should be / and then API v1, and you can see that IntelliJ is telling us that the issue was within this put method right here, right, which is really awesome. So let's try again. So right click and then debug, and the reason why we need the / is because we have the URL and then / API and then the actual path. So let's actually resume, and there we go. So you can see that it is working, and we have the request right here. So you can see that we have the request, and we have customer equals to null. So there we go. So we actually are sending the request, but the customer is null. So there is something weird going on. So let's try and fix that. So let's go, well, actually, let me simply resume here. And you can see that the test did pass, but that's because we are not doing any assertions. So let's try and figure out what is the problem here. And obviously, the reason why it was null, it's because of this customer, right? So we need the actual request. So right here, so let me show you. So right here, we need to send the customer registration request instead of customer. So if I open up the request right here, you can see that within it is expecting a customer, and we just sent customer directly into our controller right here, which is not going to work because it needs to be a customer registration request. So let's go back to the test, and right here, this will be new customer registration and then request and then pass customer. Let's now extract this to a variable so it's easier. So customer registration request and some space there. Let's try now and debug it again. There we go. If I continue or resume, you can see that now if I investigate the request, you can see that we have the customer there. There we go. So customer ID equals to null, and then James, and then 000. So we actually need the ID there, right? So why is that? So inside of customer, we have the ID there. So there we go. So it's because of this guy right here, right? So JSON ignore properties. So I think we actually need this. So let's remove it for now. So let's again restart the test. There we go. If I resume, inspect the request again, and there we go. Obviously, there we go. So we actually need the ID for integration testing. There we go. So I was actually wrong when I made the assumption that we needed to ignore the actual ID coming from the client, but we actually need it for integration testing. So you can see that now we have the ID, and if I continue, the test works. And right here we actually printed right here the customer registration request. So this is the actual toString method that we added. So now the final thing that we need to do is actually let's remove this, and right here, so we still haven't implemented the then method, but here we can simply say that customer and then reg result actions dot and then expect and then status, so status and then parentheses dot is okay and then parentheses. So we want to make sure that import that. We want to make sure that the request went fine. So let's now, instead of running debug, let's actually run it. Just give it a second. And you can see that the test is working. So this is amazing. So if I was to, for example, change this to, let's say, remove the /, run the test again. And there we go. So you see that the test failed, and it's actually given me a reason, right? So you can see that it's talking about the resolved exception, and there's a bunch of information that you could read, but basically you could see that the expected was 200, but it was actually a 404. So it's actually doing the right thing. So it's checking whether the path exists or not. So this is why we need to use MockMvc to make sure that the HTTP semantics of our API does work. If you have any questions on what we've done in this video, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on.